You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans! Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and there is a lot to get to today. We've got the Stanley Cup playoffs, the pseudo NBA playoffs, along with some other sports news. It's great. Sports are back. I couldn't be happier. Let's just get right into it. I am going to start with the Stanley Cup playoffs, and I want to start with the Islanders, but I'll recap yesterday's games first. I'll start with Blue Jackets Lightning. I was dead wrong about this game. I thought both teams were going to come out flat. They'd look to take it slow in the first period. And then as the game wore on, they would get their feet under them some more. Wow, was I wrong. 3 goals in the first period. 18 total shots on net. That's pretty average for an NHL game. You usually get about 20-ish. It could be a few more or a few less, but it's usually about 20 shots a period combined. Neither one of these teams showed any sense of fatigue, and I give them both a ton of credit. It just shows the kind of shape they're in. These are fantastic athletes. I mean, I'll tell you, in the NBA, if there was a quintuple overtime, you'd see a lot of players scratched because of rest or the proverbial lower body injury. That really didn't happen in this game. The Blue Jackets played really well in this game. They give up the early goal to Kucherov, and they don't let it affect them. They score 2 goals right back to take a 2-1 lead into the first intermission. Great. Fantastic. They had everything cooking on all cylinders. The second period was really uneventful. The third period featured probably the best moment of the game. Barclay Goodrow coming down on Korpisalo on a breakaway, and Seth Jones with a poke check or a stick lift, whatever it was exactly. It meant that Goodrow couldn't get the shot off. If Jones doesn't do that, there's a good chance it's 2-2, and that whole game changes. I give Seth Jones a ton of credit. Remember, he played 65 minutes in the quintuple overtime game. To have the speed necessary to chase down Goodrow is really, really impressive. Seth Jones, without question, is one of the better defensemen in the league. And then the Lightning had almost 4 minutes of a pseudo power play. I mean, it was 6-on-5. They pulled the goalie. They were trying to get something going, but Korpisalo stood on his head. Jonas Korpisalo is quickly establishing himself as one of the better goalies in the NHL. I mean, realize, this is a guy who stoned the Maple Leafs. Had 2 shutouts. And then he makes 85 saves in a game. I don't care that he got the loss. He made 85 saves. You've got to have some kind of talent to do that. It may be time to start putting some respect on his name. As for the Lightning, it really seemed like they were lost after that first goal. I don't know what it was. Maybe they thought that they could get it back in the third period. It seemed like what they were trying to do was get out to an early lead. And then whatever happens, happens until the third period. And then we're going to make our big push. Well, that's not going to work when you're down 2-1 headed into the third period. That doesn't work. Especially when you have a goalie like Korpisalo standing on his head. He made 36 saves in this game. He was great. There's no other word for it. He was great in this game. And you're not going to be able to beat him in one period. I like that the Lightning out-hit the Blue Jackets. Physically, the Blue Jackets were no match for the Lightning. And I'm sure that's something that Tortorella's going to stress to his guys. Don't let them get the body on you. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. The Blue Jackets got the win. They tied the series at 1. It doesn't matter that guys like Eric Cernak and Anthony Cirelli were laying the body hard on you. Is it what you really want to see as a coach? No. And it is something that John Cooper can point to. But at the end of the day, that's not gonna get the job done by itself. You've got to put the puck in the net, and the Lightning just couldn't do it. Moving on now to Blackhawks Golden Knights. And look, I was ripping the Blackhawks before this game. I don't think they're a good team. I still don't think they're a good team. But I'll give them credit. They played great in this game. They got their young guns cooking. In the second period, they thoroughly outplayed the Golden Knights. I mean, it wasn't even close. Down 2-0, I thought for sure that game was over. I didn't think that they were going to be able to come back from that. But they came back. Mark Stone scored the goal late to make it 3-2 Golden Knights. And then with less than 15 seconds left in the second period, Dylan Strome ties the game. I'll give them credit. This was the best game they've played all year. But the counter to that is, that's still not that good. Because they got outplayed in the third period. They got outshot 16-6. In overtime, they got outshot 7-1. This is the best the Blackhawks have played all year. And in the grand scheme of things, it still really wasn't that good. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great. I mean, I like the fact that they got some more production from Dominic Kubalik, really special player, and Kirby Dach scoring his first ever playoff goal. He's going to score many more before his career is over. And Dylan Strome, too. Patrick Kane played well. The Blackhawks weren't awful in this game. They just weren't great. And unfortunately for Blackhawks fans, I think this is the best they're going to get. I don't think they can play much better than this. As for the Golden Knights, I got the sense that they were coasting in the second period. I mean, they blew the 2-goal lead. They allowed the tying goal that made it 3-3 with less than 15 seconds left in the period. That doesn't work for me. You can't do that against better teams. You can do it against the Blackhawks because, again, they're not that good. But when you start playing better opponents, that's not going to work. You're going to have a tough time beating them. I mean, the one thing I'll say is, after the second intermission, they outshot the Blackhawks 23-7. So it's clear that Pete DeBoer said the same thing that I'm saying now. You guys got complacent. You've got to go back on the forecheck, make Corey Crawford work. And Crawford did play well in this game. But at the end of the day, he still gave up 4 goals. I mean, Malcolm Subban needs to come in. Again, I'm not a big Subban fan. I don't think he's that good, but if the Blackhawks want to have a chance to win this thing, they have to go to Subban. Moving on now to Hurricanes Bruins, and I'll get into what Tuukka Rask said a little later. But I gotta say, it's really impressive who the Hurricanes got some big contributions from. Dougie Hamilton scoring the game-winning goal, a guy who missed the last 21 games of the regular season, and then he missed the qualifying round against the Rangers. To come back and score a game-winning goal, that's really impressive. I give Hamilton a ton of credit. I also give Rod Brind'Amour credit for starting James Reimer. Obviously, this is the back end of a back-to-back. Peter Mrazek started 2 days ago when the game went into double overtime. Mrazek wasn't awful, but he wasn't great. He gave up 4 goals. Brind'Amour went with James Reimer, and Reimer played really, really well. He played well enough to make you think maybe he's going to get the start tomorrow. He made 33 saves against a great Bruins offense. I mean, that Bruins team wasn't at full strength. David Pastrnak did not dress. Celebrating after Game 1, it seemed like he got hurt. It doesn't seem like a long-term thing, but it is something to keep your eye on. But that shouldn't take away from what James Reimer did. He played a really, really good hockey game. Give him a ton of credit for coming in as the backup goalie and winning a playoff game. There aren't that many backups in the league that can do that. As for the Bruins, I mean, I can spin this as a positive for them. The fact that they came so close to winning without Pastrnak bodes really well for them in this series. I did pick the Hurricanes, and look, I can't change my pick. I mean, the Hurricanes were playing great in the qualifying round. The Bruins really weren't in round-robin play. And I still don't think they're playing at 100%. I've seen the Bruins play better than this. But the fact that they came so close to winning this game without Pastrnak, that's got to give you some confidence if you're a Bruins fan. If he comes back tomorrow, you've got to feel good about their chances. The big story after the game was Tuukka Rask saying, "This isn't playoff hockey. This doesn't feel like playoff hockey." I'm paraphrasing here. It's August. There are no fans. It's tough for me to think about it as playoff hockey. I mean, I understand where he's coming from. Look, we're having hockey in August. There were 2 American teams playing in Canada with no fans. That's weird. A guy like Rask is used to a bunch of Bruins fans, great fans, screaming his name after a highlight reel save. He's not getting that here. And he's used to playing hockey in the winter. And maybe June at the absolute latest. Instead, it's August. It was 90 degrees the other day. And we're playing hockey. I understand where he's coming from. It's not the smartest thing he's ever said. It is a comment that is going to rub some people the wrong way, but having said that, I understand where he's coming from. I know why people got upset. Wait a minute, I'm playing my tail off here. If we win this series, and the series after, and the series after, and the series after, I get my name on the Stanley Cup. That sounds like playoff hockey to me. I'm going 100% here. If you're not, then you shouldn't be here. Let's go with Valk. I'm sure there are a bunch of players that got upset at him. And I'm sure that Bruce Cassidy is going to talk to him afterwards. But I understand where he's coming from. I'm not going to kill him too much. The only thing I'll say to him is just use your noodle. You're allowed your feelings. I'm not begrudging you for having those feelings. Like I said, I understand where you're coming from. But you have to know that a comment like that is gonna rub a lot of people the wrong way. I mean, you've got to be smarter than that. The last game yesterday was Flames Stars. Really, really competitive game. A game that you may have had a tough time getting into because it was late. And you may not know a lot about the teams, but this was a great game. Dylan Dubé, 19 seconds into the game, scores his 3rd goal of the series. His 4th goal in the last 3 games. I mean, it's really impressive for a kid who's only played 70 games in the NHL before this to come in and emerge as a reliable playoff contributor. That's really, really impressive. And after that, it was a back-and-forth game. The Stars took the lead. The Flames made it close. The Stars had a 2-goal lead entering the 3rd period. They held the lead for more than half of the 3rd period. And then Tobias Ryder scores a great shorthanded goal. I mean, whenever you score a shorty, it's impressive. But to do it in the playoffs, to make it a 1-goal game, that's a little something extra. And then Sam Bennett on the power play. The guy's gotten a lot of heat from people calling him a bust. And he is a bust. Alright, it seems like he's going to top out as a 3rd-line center. He was the 4th overall pick in 2014. Yeah, he's a little bit of a bust. But you know what? If he can score game-tying goals, no one's going to mind too much. Unfortunately for the Flames, Jamie Oleksiak, with 40 seconds left in regulation, scores the go-ahead goal. I mean, unless you're a Stars fan, you've got to feel bad for the Flames. They come back and score 2 goals in less than 5 minutes to tie the game. They're this close to sending it to overtime, and then they give up the game-winning goal. You had to feel at least a little bit bad for him. I will say this for the Flames, though. I did say that they needed to get their big guns cooking, and they didn't. Tkachuk was invisible. Gaudreau was invisible. Lindholm was invisible. Monahan was invisible. Backlund was invisible. Tkachuk wasn't even making himself known on the physical side of things. He only had 1 hit. I know he didn't play a lot. He only played a little over 10 minutes. The Stars were targeting him with some big hits. This was a really physical game. There were 87 total hits in this game. There were a lot of players with cuts and bruises and missing teeth after that game. I can say that. And, they're going to wake up sore in the morning. And, for as much as Tkachuk throws the body around, he's still a smaller guy. 6'2", a shade over 200 pounds. If he's going up against taller players and getting sandwiched, yeah, that's going to throw him out of sorts. As for the Stars, it's really impressive that they were able to win this game. They are not a good offensive team. They win games based on their defense. I mean, this is a team that scored the 26th most goals per game in the NHL. To put that in perspective, there are 31 teams in the league. Their leading point man this year was Tyler Seguin, with only 50. They only had 1 player score 20 goals, and that was Denis Gurianov. I give them credit for being able to win a shootout. It was really surprising to me. If you would have told me that this game was going to be a 5-4 game, I'd have said, okay, the Flames got to Bishop. They pierced the defense. Good for them. I didn't think the Stars could win a shootout. I give them credit. If they can keep that up and tighten up their defense a little bit, they're going to be a tough out. Alright, now it's time to preview today's games, and I'll start with Islanders Capitals. Forgive me for not going chronologically, but I am going to start with Islanders Capitals. For the Islanders, it's really, really simple. They've got to stay out of the penalty box. Don't take stupid penalties. As nice as it was to see Anders Lee get physical, that's not his role. And that's gonna tick a lot of other players off when they see their captain getting roughed up like that. If you're the captain, you've got to settle them down and say, this is what they want, let's not give it to them. The Capitals wanted to get on the power play. That's how they scored their 2 goals. Both on the power play by Oshie. Eventually, Ovechkin's going to get going too. There's only one guy who should get into a fight. Because Anders Lee is going to be a marked man. Tom Wilson is going to go after him hard. But Anders Lee can't respond to it. Skate away. Don't let him get to you. Instead, let Ross Johnston get to him. Ross Johnston has to play in this game. He absolutely has to. Put him in Komarov's spot. Komarov is a good penalty killer. I like the experience he brings. He's a good defensive forward. But, having said that, he had a really bad game in Game 1. He's the only guy who you're going to scratch. And Johnston needs to be in this lineup. Alright, Tom Wilson is a gnat. The Islanders don't have anyone who can match up with him. It can't be any of the fourth liners. Once one of them is out of the equation, Martin, Cizikas, or Clutterbuck, whoever, once one of them is out of the equation, that whole line gets thrown into flux. Put Johnston on the third line in Komarov's spot and tell him you have one job. Knock Tom Wilson out of this game. I don't care how you do it. Give him cheap shots. Go all Marty McSorley on him. I don't care. Get him out of this game. Because he's going to look to kill Anders Lee. In fact, he may look to kill some other Islanders also. Bailey, Barzell, Beauvillier, Nelson. You can't let him do that. Ross Johnston needs to knock Tom Wilson out of this game. Goad him into a fight. Goad him into a misconduct. Once he's out of the equation, the Islanders are home free. Because there's no one who's going to pester them into taking stupid penalties. That's the only way that the Capitals can beat the Islanders. Todd Reirden knows that. You want to tell me I'm advocating violence? That's not the right way to play the game? Look, the game is better when the players police themselves. Tom Wilson is upset at Anders Lee because he knocked Nicholas Backstrom out of the game. And he's not going to play tonight. That's official. So Wilson's going to look to go after the Islanders. They have to counter by inserting Johnston. Don't let Lee be the one to do it. Let the goon Johnston do it. As for the Capitals, I mean, they've got to focus on getting Ovechkin going. Their 5-on-5 has been dreadful. You can't wait for the power play to get Ovechkin going. I understand it's a tall ask against this Islander defense, and Semyon Varlamov has been having a great playoffs. But, I've said this before, the Capitals are only going to go as far as Ovechkin takes them. If he doesn't get going soon, the Capitals are going to be embarrassed in this series. They can't rely on Oshie to do it alone. Moving on now to Coyotes Avalanche. For the Coyotes, it's really simple. Just generate more offense. Dump and chase if you have to. Get a strong forecheck going. Support Darcy Kemper. Kemper played well. He shut the Avalanche down for the vast majority of that game. Then eventually he folded. Yeah, of course he did. You know that Kemper's not going to pitch a shutout, so you have to support him offensively. You've got to get more than 14 shots on net. They have some really talented players. Hall, Keller, Dvorak, Kessel, Ekman-Larsson. They have guys who can generate offense. Derek Stepan also. Michael Grabner, try to spring him on some breakaways. See if he can use his speed to get the puck past Grubauer. The Coyotes have to generate more offense. It's just that simple. It may sound like the obvious thing to say. Well, I can't make anything up. It's pretty simple what they have to do to win. As for the Avalanche, do exactly what they did on Wednesday. They played as close to a perfect game as we're ever going to see in hockey. I mean, look, I'd have liked them to have gotten to Kemper a little earlier, but to only allow 14 shots on net while getting 40 of your own, you're doing something right. Nazem Kadri has been a revelation in these playoffs. The Avalanche are playing like the best team in the Western Conference. As it stands right now, I think they're going to be that conference's representative in the Cup Finals. Moving on now to Canadiens Flyers. The big story here is that Claude Julien will not coach for the rest of this series. He had to leave the bubble to go to a Toronto hospital to get a stent put in his heart. He's in Montreal right now. He is recovering. It's going to be tough for the Canadiens to come back from that, because Kirk Muller is not a good coach. I understand he's a former player, he played for the Habs, and he has coaching experience. The Canadiens made the right choice in saying that he's going to coach the team for the rest of this series. They didn't have another choice, but having said that, Muller was dreadful with the Hurricanes. He's not going to come in and immediately get these guys generating scoring chances. The key for the Canadiens is to use the absence of Julien as motivation. Win this series for Julien. That's how they need to look at this. As for the Flyers, it's really tough, but look, we all know that Carter Hart is going to stand on his head. Alright, that's a given. You've got to help him out a little bit. I understand you're going up against Carey Price, but you've got to help him out. You know, I'm looking at guys like Konechny, Couturier, Voracek, Giroux, Hayes, and JVR to step up and generate some offense. Get quality scoring chances. Those guys are talented enough to beat Carey Price. They just have to execute. It's just that simple. Moving on now to Canucks Blues. For the Canucks, they played as close to a perfect game as you can expect, just like the Avalanche did. I understand that Jacob Markstrom allowed 2 goals, but look, Jacob Markstrom isn't Roberto Luongo. He's not Corey Schneider. He is going to allow goals. He's not a bad goalie, but he's not a great goalie. The Canucks had their offense clicking, 3 for 6 on the power play. They generated quality scoring chances against Binnington, who has looked like garbage in these playoffs. The only thing I would say is don't let them lay the body on you that much. The Canucks only had 18 hits in Game 1. The Blues had 30. They were by far and away the more physical team. But other than that, they're set up really well to win this game. As for the Blues, the number one thing is to just get Jordan Binnington's head screwed on straight. It's not the defense. Alright, their defense has been fine. And it's not the offense either. It's Binnington. In fact, I wouldn't be upset if Craig Berube started Jake Allen I could make a very strong case for that. In his one playoff game so far this year, Allen stood on his head. He took the game to overtime against the Stars. He made 37 saves. I mean, the Stars won in a shootout. There are no shootouts anymore. If you want to give Binnington one more chance, you can, but I'd have him on a very short leash if I was Berube. So far, he is being incredibly outcoached by Travis Green. The last game to talk about is Stars-Flames. For the Stars, I'd like them to get back to their identity a little bit. They're not going to win a bunch of shootouts. It's nice to have that ability if you're the Stars, but that's not why they got here. They got here because they have an incredible defense. They allowed the second least amount of goals per game in the whole league. I don't want to take away anything from their offense, but they've got to tighten up defensively. As for the Flames, it's similar to what I said yesterday. Get the big guns going. I don't know if Tkachuk is going to play or not. Alright, let's say he isn't. You've got to get Gaudreau going, Lindholm, Monahan, Backlund, Giordano, Mangiapane, who's actually had a really strong playoffs. Dylan Dubé needs to keep up his great play. Get contributions from the guys who you know can produce. Don't rely on the unsung heroes. I do want to talk about the NBA play-in game that's going to happen tomorrow and maybe Sunday. What's happening is the Trailblazers are the 8th seed and the Grizzlies are the 9th seed. So, the way the NBA has arranged this is the Trailblazers and Grizzlies are going to play at least one, maybe 2 games over the weekend. The Blazers just need to win 1, and they get to face the Lakers. The Grizzlies need to win twice, and then they get to face the Lakers. The Spurs are out of it, incredibly. That fantastic streak is over. And despite the Suns going undefeated in the bubble, they still couldn't get into the playoffs. It's almost like the NBA should have gone straight to the playoffs. For the Grizzlies, it's really simple. They've got to go to the guys who have led them to this unexpected, magical journey. No one expected the Grizzlies to be this good. But Ja Morant looks like he's going to be the next great point guard in this league. Jaren Jackson Jr. has come into his own as a great stretch 4. Dylan Brooks has provided some really good scoring. Jonas Valanciunas in the interior, double-double threat every night. The weak link is Kyle Anderson, but he's experienced. I don't mind him starting on a young Grizzlies team. Brandon Clark has been a spark plug off the bench. I could see him starting next year. Ride the guys who got you here. They're a good team with really talented players, and a really, really good coach in Taylor Jenkins. Don't try to throw too many curveballs. Stick to your identity. As for the Trailblazers, it's all about Logo Lillard. I mean, we all know that. I was watching him yesterday kill the Nets. I mean, he was hitting shots where literally his feet were touching the logo at center court. How do you defend that? You want a player taking those shots. Those are supposed to be bad shots. Instead, he's drilling them. With the Trailblazers' backs against the wall, winning you're in, lose and you're going home, he drops 42 points and 12 assists. He was insane. CJ McCollum, from the mid-range, had 25 points. Lillard set him up beautifully. Yusuf Nurkic bullying Jared Allen inside. I mean, granted, Nurkic isn't going to be able to do that against Valanciunas that easily. That's going to be a very interesting battle to watch, as is the point guard battle. I mean, that's really what this is going to come down to. Damian Lillard versus Ja Morant. And ultimately, the way that Lillard has been playing since the restart, he hasn't scored less than 21 points in his last 3 games. The lowest point total he's had is 42. I'm going to say that the Trailblazers are going to win one of these games. I don't see how the Grizzlies can beat them twice, because that means that Lillard has to be off twice. That's not going to happen. Moving on now to the Chiefs locking up their star tight end. They saw George Kittle get his big extension, so they knew what amount they couldn't go over, and they didn't. And they were still able to lock up Travis Kelce for 4 years at $57.25 million. While this is a lot of money for a Chiefs team that is going to be in cap hell sooner rather than later, it's a fair contract for Kelce. He's the second highest paid tight end behind Kittle in any metric you want to look at. And I said before that Kelce is the second best tight end in the league behind Kittle. The big thing is, how are the Chiefs going to be able to afford everyone down the line? But, you know, I've said that before. You cross that bridge when you get there. Their window to win is now. God only knows what is going to happen to Patrick Mahomes. I'm not wishing this on him. Far from it. But the coronavirus is a thing. Also, this is the NFL. Players suffer huge injuries all the time. The Chiefs' window to win is now. Worry about the future later. Lock up the guys who you need to lock up. I have no problem with the Chiefs doing this at all. Moving on now to the Bills locking up Dion Dawkins for 4 years at $60 million. And this may seem like an overpay when you first hear it, because Dion Dawkins isn't a household name, but this is a very, very fair contract. Dion Dawkins is without question one of the best offensive tackles in the NFL. Since coming into the league, he's never had a Pro Football Focus grade worse than 69.9. Last year, he had a 73.4 overall grade. He played in every game last year and the year before. The Bills know how important it is for them to keep Josh Allen upright. They have done everything in their power to surround this guy with talent and to keep that talent there for a substantial period of time. You've got to love what the Bills have done. I think they're going to win the AFC East. In fact, I'll go a step further. I think we're going to look at this as the blueprint to how you should support your young quarterback. I think people are going to look at how the Bills traded for Diggs, locked up Dawkins, and just surrounded Allen with quality talent as the prototype for how you should properly build around your franchise quarterback. The last story that I want to talk about is the Bulls firing Jim Boylen. This has been long overdue. Jim Boylen is not a good head coach. There's really nothing that he does well. I mean, I really can't say anything nice about him. Bulls fans hate him. I know that for a fact, because I subscribe to King of the Fourth Quarter on YouTube. I mean, this guy doesn't get along with players. He has an old school philosophy that just doesn't work in today's NBA. You got to be able to alter your approach if you're Boylen, and he hasn't done that. I mean, when you go 39-84 as a head coach, you're doing something wrong. If you doubled the number of wins that Boylen has as head coach of the Bulls, he would still be under 500. I don't need to say any more than that. This guy is a terrible coach. Kenny Atkinson needs to be the hire. The Bulls need to find a guy who's going to get the most out of their young guns. Guys like Levine, Markkanen, Carter, White, and Hutchison. There's no better coach out there in developing young talent than Kenny Atkinson. The Knicks should have hired him. They didn't. The Bulls should capitalize on their typical mistake and bring him in. And I think in a very short period of time, the Bulls are going to be back in the playoffs. It's a big week next week. Obviously, the NBA playoffs kicking into high gear. I'm pretty sure that I'm going to have early podcasts for that week and possibly part of the week after. So, at noon, make sure to check for new episodes of the Jacob Valk Show. Also, on Monday, you're going to get an interview that I'm going to do with Frank Garland, the author of a biography on Archie Vaughan, Pittsburgh Pirates Hall of Fame shortstop. And on Tuesday, you're going to get an interview that I'm going to do with Joe Siegman, the chairman of the selection committee for the International Jewish Sports Hall of Fame. I have been there in Israel. He wrote a book with biographies of all of their inductees. It's going to be really fun to talk to him. If you couldn't tell by the name, I am Jewish. I'm proud of my heritage. It's going to be a lot of fun. You're also going to get a Yankees show at 6 p.m. on Monday. Until Monday, I am Jacob Valk saying that Randy Jones was a lefty with a Karl Marx hairdo.